Airline travel showed some small signs of recovery this Memorial Day weekend. And as you can see from this chart, there was an uptick in airline travel for the first time in almost 2 months. More than 650,000 people passed through TSA screenings on Thursday and Friday, which sounds like a lot, but that's a lot less than the 5.2 million on those same days last year. Some airlines, though, are not doing that well. Delta has grounded their 777 wide-body jets and plan to lay off, check this out, half of their pilots. That's 7,000 of their 13,100 pilots. And in spite of those dismal numbers, the Flight Attendants Union has previously said that it wants to ban leisure travel to prevent crowded planes. Joining us now is the head of the Flight Attendants Union, Sara Nelson. Sara, welcome back.
Thank you, Sean. Glad to be here.
So let me ask you this. I know a few weeks ago you were really concerned about leisure travel. Based on what we saw this weekend, does that alleviate any of your concerns?
Well, I want to be really clear that what we were talking about was what was in line with the CARES Act. There's a recognition that air travel fell off to just 3% demand. I think over the weekend, we're looking at somewhere around 15% demand. As you noted, that's simply not enough to make an industry work. And so it was always about using this time to put in place safety measures to make sure that that air travel continues to aid in attacking the virus, but not in spreading it. And so in terms of banning leisure travel, that was always supposed to be for a short period of time. And it was also about helping people understand that travel is essential during this time. And so when people didn't understand what that meant about essential travel, we gave it that definition. I think it's very important that as the airlines have put in place provisions like the requirements for everyone to wear a mask, the social distancing in the airports, the deep cleaning that's going on. As you layer these safety provisions in place, we are getting to a place where we can regain the traveling public's confidence. Because let's face it, even at those numbers over this weekend, that does not a successful industry make. So we have to really make sure that we're putting in place provisions that are helping to regain that confidence so people will actually be able to buy airplane tickets.
That's absolutely right. We talked to Elaine Chao about this, that we've got to have confidence in this so that people want to travel, whether it's by plane, rail, or boat, whatever. We also asked her about an issue that I think is important to every industry, but is important to the airlines in particular, about liability. Here's what Elaine Chao had to say about that.
Oh, I think the whole of government is involved in this manner. I mean, all employers are concerned about liability, considerations. Because as workers come back, I mean, every employer is going to be worried about that. So liability protection, I think, is pretty important.
Sara, I know this isn't necessarily in your wheelhouse, but a lot of industries, obviously the airline industry in particular, are concerned that someone's going to get on a plane, they're going to catch COVID, and they're going to sue them. And so is liability insurance important to sustaining the airline industry?
Well, I think that where we have to start is actually focusing on the safety provisions that need to be in place. I think it's sending a pretty bad signal to consumers and also to workers to say that the first priority of businesses is going to be liability insurance. That sends a signal that things are not going to be safe. So I'm really actually very concerned about the messaging around that. And I think that what we need to spend our time on is helping to explain to people what is being done to minimize the risk or eliminate it entirely. And so I would say it's not a great place to be leading with liability insurance when we're trying to regain confidence.
Well, Sara, you make a good point. We talked to Elaine Chao if there should be one standard across the board for all the airlines for social distancing guidelines. Of course, they have not put one in. Some of the airlines, like you mentioned, coming together to create that. But do you think that there should be a federal standard for some of these practices?
Yes, actually, we have asked DOT and HHS to work together and work with the industry to put in place a plan for air travel. If we are all working off of the same standards, we can actually put something in place that works, that sets clear parameters for the traveling public so they understand exactly what's going to happen and what those expectations are. And then the airlines are really following the experts with input from the industry as we make these guidelines and from the people on the front lines. We could put together a task force that could have a very clear plan that would help make sure that we're safe and healthy, but also help to make very clear instructions for the traveling public about what is being done to protect them. One standard of safety across the board. That's how the industry has acted in the past, and that's how we should act going forward.
You know, Sara, Delta, as you may have heard, had a leaked memo where they talked about potentially laying off up to half of their pilots. That's 7,000 pilots, grounding the 777 fleet. Obviously, no pilots, no planes, no flight attendants. How concerned are you for the people that you represent about the viability of this industry after October 1st, when these airlines can start laying off people according to the agreement of the CARES Act?
Sean, I'm very concerned. I think that unions and the industry worked very well together to get the funding in place to make sure that our industry didn't completely collapse in March. But we have more work to do here. What was being predicted at that time was that we would start to be able to really reopen our economy and get moving again by the fall. And I think that the experts have said that we're not quite there yet. We're not going to make it there. So what's being recognized by lawmakers right now on the Hill is discussing continued funding for corporations through the end of the year. We're going to be working very hard to make sure that lawmakers continue that funding for the airline industry as well, because the whole idea here was to make sure that the industry stays intact, continues to provide that essential service, and is ready to lift off again for our entire economy. We do provide the backbone to the economy, and it's going to be very important that that funding continue through the rest of the year.
Well, Sara, thank you for joining us and giving us this update. Hope to have you back in a few months and hear how great everybody is taken to the skies and everything's back to normal. So thank you again for joining us.
We look forward to that too. Thanks, Sean.
All right.
Thanks, Lindsay. Bye.
All righty. Well, could you take communist China to court over the effects of COVID-19? I bet you'd like to. Well, Senator Marsha Blackburn wants you to be able to, and she's joining us next. Plus, a legendary newsman is creating quite a stir by telling it like it is. He says the mainstream media is, shocker, indeed biased. You're not going to want to miss this. Stick around.